The Dying Soprano. Today, we are going to discuss the classical soprano, the time she thrived, and why we see so few of them today. We will discuss the history of the modern belting style on Broadway, as well as discuss the types of sopranos we see today and hypothesize what happened to the dying soprano. Sopranos today are often thought of as dramatic leads wearing Viking helmets and singing opera.
Picture somebody, a dark-haired woman, probably somewhat heavy-set, but in some sort of lovely gown.
Probably really preppy, blonde, high-pitched voice, typical prima donna. Probably just described myself in high school. It's kind of unfortunate.
We don't typically listen to music on the radio with classical sopranos and sing along the way we do with more modern pop and hip-hop songs. Why is that? Most people today don't consider opera their preferred genre of music. It has become an extremely underappreciated culture of music because opera was associated with the high society of the 18th and 19th centuries. The general public today is in the working class and appreciates the music more tailored to them. Not only that, but we simply do not see or hear opera being performed as much as it was. Musical theater has taken over as the main form of musical entertainment, and with radios and recording studios, pop music can be enjoyed without spending money or a trip out to the theater. If these were the only changes that had been made to the appreciation of opera over time, then we would still tend to see a larger number of singers who performed opera as their main genre of choice. However, we do not. What happened to all of the classically trained sopranos? Sopranos are characterized by having a very light and colorful tone. Sopranos, even at their loudest, do not have an abrasive timbre. This lightness allows them to reach very high notes by not putting extreme pressure or wear on the vocal folds when they sing. In the early days of opera, the orchestrations were very light so that sopranos could be heard over the orchestra since microphones had not been invented yet. You can hear that during most of this section, the instrumentation is very low pitched, and when it comes towards the upper soprano range, it gets very thin and light, not to overpower the soprano soloist. Mozart and Haydn played around with the range of sopranos by pushing them to their limits. Back in the days when opera was popular, composers who were notoriously male would date women with incredible vocal ranges who they could show off in their operas. These high notes would ring out well over the orchestras and became very exciting. Many of the girls of the time wanted to date composers that would feature them in their works, so girls would work hard to improve their vocal range and agility. Being a true soprano became very important if young singers wanted to make it big in the opera world. Because of this, many people today associate sopranos as only being girls who can sing very high and quick.
I have a feeling that perhaps the bad thoughts in my mind come from the high.
These are trademarks of a coloratura, which is a subset of soprano. There are, however, many problems with the soprano voice. As mentioned earlier, sopranos are very light, and projecting was very hard unless they were at the tops of their ranges. When sopranos are pushed very high, it makes pronouncing words very difficult because a soprano can only make certain vowel sounds in their upper ranges. Using light head voice is only strong on certain vowels such as ah and o. Chest voice can make it much easier to understand different sounds because that is the voice that we communicate with and are used to hearing.
I used to pray for the day you'd leave. Swore up and down you did not belong. But when I'm wrong, then I say I'm wrong, and I was wrong about you. So listen up, I see no end to what you'll achieve. That's only if you don't turn and run. You proved it to me, now show everyone what you can do. And you look great in dark blue. Get back in the game, back on the case. Take a good look at my face. I'm not a fool, and as a rule, I do not want. I see a star, all I know of you. Now that's the prescription. You refuse, so go show blues. Legally, you refuse, so go show blues. Legally. I used to pray for the day you leave. Swore up and down you did not belong. But when I'm wrong, then I say I'm wrong, and I was wrong about you. So listen up, I see no end to what you'll achieve, and that's only if you don't turn and run. You proved it to me, now show everyone what you can do, and you look great in dark blue. Get back in the game, back on the case. Take a good look at my face. I'm not a fool, and as a rule, I do not lie. But I see a star, you're my nephew. You've got the best freaking news, and you refuse, so go show and lose. Legally, and you refuse, so go show and lose. Legally.
You can hear that the classical soprano sound is much lighter and less emotive. The belting sound was much heavier and could emote much more easily. Being a soprano, and especially a coloratura, requires a lot of vocal agility that is easily disrupted. Classical sopranos usually have to stand still when performing many runs or melismas. We use our chest voices much more naturally with a wide range of agility so that when someone sings primarily in their chest voice, even while belting, they can move around a bit more, which allows more freedom from the performer.
Back in the game, back in the fray. Back the hell out of the way. Out of the way. They say you're fired. What? Guess who I hired? Who? Represent me. You gotta be. Yeah, you gotta be. Yeah, you gotta be. Individually. Legally. Yeah, you say I am wrong. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you say I am wrong. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you say I am wrong. Oh, yeah. Legally wrong. Oh, yeah.
As audience halls began growing and more people began attending performances, singers needed to be louder and even more clear. Composers of the early 20th century also began writing very thick orchestral score. George Gershwin notably wrote very thick and luscious orchestral scores that were often hard for classical sopranos to sing over. Women of the time could usually sing up to an A4 or so in chest voice. Singing high in your chest voice is a technique known as belting, which is usually very loud and brassy. Gershwin liked to utilize his technique in his more jazzy compositions so that the singer could be heard. He even wrote for Ethel Merman to sing a high C5 in her chest voice for over 24 measures.
Who can ask for anything more?
As orchestrations got thicker post-Gershwin, singers began to be required to sing in their belting chest voice to be heard. Music also began to become much more high energy, and the classical soprano sound that we were used to hearing could not keep up the excitement. The brassy sound of belters was able to keep high energy up for long periods of time. Around this time, crooners were starting to become more popular. Crooners were known for their notoriously soft and smooth singing style, completely contrasting female belters. With orchestrations consistently becoming thicker and soft singing styles becoming popular, something needed to be done. Sopranos simply could not keep up with their light and lyrical singing style and needed to switch to the louder belting style in order to be heard or understood. This led to the creation of the microphone, which allowed singers to not have to project to be heard. In the theater setting, this helped with the songs because singers could walk up and sing into microphones. This did not help with the spoken lines that actors said, so mics needed to become more prevalent, and the creation of body mics was born. Today, many trained singers much prefer the ubiquitous belting style to classical style singing. Belting can make words more pronounced, can give more emotion, and can even allow more range of a singer. We surveyed trained singers around Chapel Hill, and even some from farther away. Singers were asked about their preferred singing style, as well as their vocal range and best matched theater role. The average vocal range for the women who filled out the survey was a low note of E3 to a belted note of C#5, and finally a head-voiced note of C6. The average preferred style of singing was the belt style as well. If we look at modern repertoire for female singers today, including shows such as Wicked, Phantom of the Opera, Evita, and more, the average vocal range for a female performer is a low note of G3 and a belted note of F5. This is a little out of the vocal range of the average female singer today. The low notes are all easily obtainable, but the higher belted notes take much more work and effort to be able to obtain. Yet, the average woman who was polled stated that their voice was much more suited in theater and that they did not feel represented by classical soprano styles. When we look at the average classical soprano range over many shows such as The Magic Flute, Don Giovanni, The Tales of Hoffmann, and more, the average vocal range for a soprano is a low note of C#4 to a high head voice note of A#5 or B-flat-5. These notes are well within the average range of the trained singers polled. So how come they felt unrepresented in opera, but more represented in musical theater? It's also worth noting that the average singer indicated that they were a mezzo-soprano. Most non-singers do not know what a mezzo-soprano is, but she is the type of light soprano singer that operates best in the middle range of the female voice. A mezzo-soprano will have an average range of about A3 to A5. So today we have discussed the history of the classical soprano and when she thrived. We've discussed the transition into the modern belt style of singing and why it became popular. The average trained female singer today, we observed, has the vocal range to become a classical soprano, but the average singer feels like they are more fit for musical theater or belting style. Singers should be encouraged to expand their horizons and views of the musical world today. There is a thriving opera community in the world that we very rarely see. The Metropolitan Opera House is one of the top-tiered performance houses for opera in the world. The world needs more classical sopranos to bring a seemingly dead form of art back to life.